welcome back to Podcast and Amplify. So this is the ChatGPT episode. I know everyone has been seeing articles, podcasts, you name it, about ChatGPT. Everyone's talking about it, and there are a lot of opinions around how ChatGPT is going to change our lives, change how we work. That's not what we're going to get into in this show today. I will let others have that conversation and debate that topic of how this new tool is going to shape how we do work in the future. But what I did want to talk about on this episode is how can we use ChatGPT as sort of a partner to help us be more efficient in podcasting? So how can we use this AI tool to help us create certain elements of our podcasts quicker, more efficiently? And so I'm going to dive into 5 or 6 ways that I've experimented with ChatGPT when it comes to my podcast. This is all still really new and sort of experimental, but I wanted to at least go over how ChatGPT can be used for podcasting purposes. So number 1, naming your show. So I don't know about you, but I really dislike naming things. It's not one of my strengths, which I'm a super creative person. I can come up with titles and taglines, but the actual naming of things drives me nuts. And hats off to all of you people out there who are really good at it, because I rely on you to help me with the naming things. So if you're like me and you need support in that way, you can type into ChatGPT something along the lines of name ideas for a business podcast for female entrepreneurs. So throughout this episode, I'm going to use my show as an example. And so I'll read to you some of the suggestions that ChatGPT generated. So number 1 was She Means Business. Number 2, Boss Lady Chronicles. Number 3, there was also the Hustle Her Way podcast, the Female Founder podcast. I think my least favorite was Boss Lady Chronicles. So those are just a few examples of some of the names that were generated. Now, obviously, you'd have to go and cross-reference these and make sure that none of them are taken already, but it gives you a place to start instead of just starting from scratch. And there's some alliteration at play. They're short and quick, so it can get you in that mindset of the short, catchy names when you're trying to name your podcast. Let's talk about ideas for your podcast. Sometimes people have a hard time brainstorming what they want to talk about on each episode, and you can type in ChatGPT ideas for guests for a business podcast. So that was a very vague description. And so the topics were also very vague. So with ChatGPT, the more specific you get, the better. So I then went in and typed, because I didn't like the responses that I got. They were just so blah and broad. So I went in and I typed in ideas for guests for business podcasts for female entrepreneurs and coaches. And that gave me at the top of the list Marie Forleo, entrepreneur, writer, and philanthropist. And if any of you have been in the online business space, you know Marie Forleo would be a great get for as a podcast guest. It listed Brene Brown, Sophia Amoruso, founder and CEO of Girl Boss, Gabby Bernstein, she's the author, speaker, and life coach, Mel Robbins, motivational speaker. So the more specific I got, the more specific responses it gave me. So another way that ChatGPT can help you is by helping you come up with questions. So I typed in, what are some questions to ask a business leader or coach? And some of the questions it came up with were, what inspired you to pursue a career as a business leader or coach? What is your philosophy on leadership and how do you approach coaching others? What advice do you have for someone who's just starting out in their career or business? Can you share a recent success story or accomplishment you're particularly proud of? So these are pretty basic, generic questions. But if you maybe typed in a little more specificity as to what you were looking for, maybe there's a topic that the business leader coming on or the coach is talking about specifically, you might get better answers. So let's try that. Okay, so I edited the question to say, what are some questions to ask a business leader or coach about marketing? So the responses that came up were, how do you approach developing a marketing strategy for a new product or service? How do you identify and target your ideal customer or audience? What marketing channels have been most effective for you? Can you share an example of a successful marketing campaign? What role does storytelling play in your marketing strategy? So these questions are obviously more specific about the topic. I'm sure you could drill down and get even more specific, but if you're someone who has trouble coming up with questions, this is a place to start. So you're not starting from scratch. And that's really what ChatGPT offers, is really not having to start these things from scratch. These type of things are the things that I love coming up with. So these aren't difficult for me and it's actually fun. But if that's not the case for you, then this is a great tool. So one of the coolest things I think that ChatGPT can help you with is creating podcast episode titles, because it's going to give you an SEO optimized title, which is fantastic. And that's the part that I actually really like. So I typed in podcast episode titles for somatic plus communication because I have an episode on that. And so I wanted to see what it came up with. So the number one title was The Art of Listening, Understanding the Body's Communication, Navigating Body Language in Difficult Conversations, The Mind-Body Connection, How Somatic Awareness Can Improve Communication, Unpacking Unspoken Messages, Somatic Clues and Communication. Ooh, I like that one. Exploring the connection between somatic awareness and emotional intelligence. I mean, a lot of these are really good and I would actually use them. The Power of Embodied Communication, a conversation with a somatic practitioner. So these are actually really great titles that I can see using. So it just depends on what your episode is about, but this is a really great place to start. Okay, so finally, you can also use ChatGPT to help you come up with questions that will engage your audience. So I typed in, what are some questions to ask a podcast listener of somatic and communication episode? And it came up with, what inspired you to listen to this episode about somatic and communication? Did you learn anything new from this episode? If so, what was it? How do you plan to apply what you learned in this episode to your own life or work? Was there a particular insight or moment in this episode that resonated with you? And if so, what was it? Was there anything in this episode that you disagreed with or found challenging? So these are all questions that you can repurpose for any other episode and just swap out, the topic. But it gave me about 10 different questions that I could repurpose for other episodes and other podcasts and other social media posts, because our social media posts, we really do want to invite engagement, ask questions, because that's really the value in having a social media presence when you have a podcast. It's not necessarily to convert people to go from the Instagram app to go listen to the podcast. That doesn't typically happen, but it is a great place to engage with your listeners after they've listened to an episode. So that is just a quick rundown of how you can use ChatGPT for podcasting to help you name your show, come up with ideas for your episodes, write your titles, your descriptions that are SEO optimized, ask questions that are engaging for your guests, and then also engaging for your audience. So I hope this helped to sort of demystify ChatGPT a little bit if you haven't experimented with it yet. And if you've already been using it, then you know how powerful of a tool this is and how it can really just be a time saver and an assistant to helping you produce content on your podcast. So some of you might be thinking, okay, is this going to take away work from content creators? And the answer is no. It's going to make content creators' lives easier, but it's not going to replace what a human being can bring to content marketing, which is specificity, nuance, critical thinking, experience, all the things that we as humans bring to everything that we do, especially creating content. And so for me, as someone who provides content support with my podcast marketing and management services, the marketing that I provide is very strategic. So we are looking at all of your content. We're looking at your business goals, your content goals, and ChatGPT is just really not going to be able to do that for you. It can help create some of the elements and give you a base to work from that will save some of the time, but it's not going to give you the strategy for marketing your podcast. It's not going to tell you where you should be promoting your podcast. It's not going to give you the growth strategy. So those are things that require humans. So at this point, it is not a us or them scenario. It's really a how can we partner with this new tool to help make our jobs easier so that we can focus on bigger picture things that we as humans do that a program just cannot do. So that's it for today. I hope that this was an informative episode. And if you have any questions around ChatGPT and you want to chat with me about it, hit me up on Instagram. I'm at Podcast and Amplify. And if you need support in launching your podcast, then please reach out to me. I love co-creating podcasts and making sure that they are aligned with your voice, your mission, and that they're going to help you grow your business. And also, if you have a podcast and you want support marketing and managing your podcast, I do that as well. And I'd love to take that off your plate and help you think bigger picture strategically about how your podcast can really be a powerful marketing tool, content marketing tool in your tool belt, and then take off the back end audio editing, posting business for you. And so that's what we do for you when you sign up for my podcast marketing and management services. You can find out everything you need to about these services at podcastandamplify.com. I will link our website in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of Podcast and Amplify. If you love the show, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And the best way to support this show is by sharing, rating, and reviewing the podcast. For those of you who leave a review, you'll get the chance to win a 30-minute strategy session or a mini audit of your existing podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember, your voice and what you have to offer is needed in the world. Until next week, take care.